Apple brought out some new computers this week. So is now a good time to upgrade? Well, I like CPU-heavy computers, not just because they run Football Manager well, but because they also run the other stuff I like to do well. It might be when FM25 comes, we're going to need to care more about graphics cards, but I doubt it's going to make that much difference. This is the thread I use when I'm thinking about how computers run Football Manager. You get some standard benchmarks, and then you get lists that are crowdsourced of different computers and how fast they run the benchmarks. Fortunately, this nerd on the internet figured out that Geekbench, which is a standardized benchmark, correlates pretty closely with how well a computer runs FM. So then as new computers are released, you can look at their benchmarks in Geekbench and then work out roughly how good they're going to be for FM. Sure enough, this is a list which is based on the thread I just showed you. And this is a bunch of computers and how fast they run the standard benchmarks in FM, and then their Geekbench test scores. Basically, single core tells you how fast your computer is going to feel playing FM, and multi-core tells you how fast your computer is going to feel if you load absolutely loads of leagues. I mean loads and loads and loads. Generally, single core for me has been clearly and consistently the most reliable way to think about computers. So if a computer's got a CPU has got a high Geekbench 6 single core score, then it's good for running FM. Now you can use this thing called logical increments, which tells you if you're going to build a high-end gaming style PC, what to use at different cost levels. So here's CPU, and if you go down to the bottom here, the monstrous $3,000, £3,000 PC is R9 7950, and then the Intel one is i9 13900. And if you go back to this, there's the 13900 and there's the R9 7950. And if you look at their single core scores, they're about 3000, and their multi-core scores are about 20,000. That's the context in which you can now look at these new M4 chips which have been released by Apple. And these you can see take things on a bit. So the Geekbench scores go from sort of 3000 up towards high 3000s, almost 4000, and the multi-core go from 20,000. And it depends on which one you go for. So the M4, standard M4 is at about 15,000, and then the Pro and the Max are better. Now, obviously, if you're going to have these CPUs, they're Apple, which means everything is Apple, it's all Mac OS. If you prefer Windows, then you've got the desktop ones that just looked at, or from a laptop point of view, you've got the new Snapdragon chip that came out, and the Elite one is at sort of 2,500. And if you look at that 2,500, it's about as good as a sort of M2 Mac laptop. Or if you want a Windows laptop, what you can do is look at this thread, which again comes from the SI forums, where people post their use case and they get recommendations for PC or for laptops, but they're generally, a lot of the recommendations on here tend to be Windows laptops. Here's a recommendation that has been put on there this week. So for 800 quid, it comes with the i7 12650H processor, and then for 1600 quid, i7 14700HX. If you put those in here, those have got the Geekbench score of about sort of 2,400, 2,700. So again, sort of in line with maybe the M2 generation of Macs. One thing you find with an Intel laptop is if you've got it plugged in, you'll see the performance, the benchmark set out. If you've got it on battery, you'll probably find a fairly substantial degradation in performance, maybe sort of 30, 40% in my experience. If you play a lot of FM on trains and planes like I do, you'll probably care more about how it performs on battery. And if you do, you'll probably lean towards the Mac laptops. And obviously, just generally, whether you play on a laptop or a desktop depends on whether you want to be able to move around while you play the game or whether you're okay being fixed in one location. So, okay, these new M4 processors take us into a new place for power for playing FM. But which things should you actually buy given all of this information? So I think there's a balance of power, portability, and price. And I think there are three computers that really jump out as the best ideas of which way to go. The first one, if you really want the power, but you're not so bothered about the portability and your value cost conscious, then this one, a Mac Mini, the new base Mac Mini, which is £600, it's £500 with an Apple Education discount if you can qualify for that. It's just a phenomenal computer, I think. The base M4 is mighty powerful. It's not that expensive. If you've already got the keyboard, the screen, the mouse from a previous computer, and you can plug them into this. And if you're okay with being static and it's not a laptop, you can't move around, I think this is a really good deal. That Mac Mini would put you here with the base M4. If you do value portability and you don't have a screen and a keyboard and a mouse, for the same cost, you're still doing pretty well down here with an M1. And you can go on eBay and get a used M1 MacBook Air something like 450 quid, although I think they will get cheaper as the new computers come out. Try and get yourself 16 gig of RAM. Something like this would be a really good computer, 450 quid. It could get a bit cheaper than this. That'll be plenty fast enough for playing FM. I think it's a phenomenal computer. And if you want the best of the best without getting completely ridiculous on cost, I think you end up here with an M4 Pro. And specifically, I think if you end up with a MacBook Pro 14-inch, the base M4 Pro model, which is £2,000 in the UK, again, a bit less with an Apple Education discount, I think you end up with more power than the previous generation of desktop computers. You end up with portability, and yes, it's expensive, but it's not completely ridiculous, which is where you can end up once you get an M4 Max and customize it with every single upgrade. That's my justification anyway, and I think I'm about to upgrade. Let me know what you reckon in the comments.